This week on Quality Digest Live, we look at some life-changing moments in quality.
Wow. Plus, can design of experiments work in areas away from the shop floor? We'll find out when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for January 16th, 2015. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. Well, if you use an air gauge for dimensional measurement, you might want to consider the following. About 90% of the time, your air gauge is sitting there doing nothing. Nothing except allowing air to flow through it, that is. Now, if you consider that air comes from a large industrial air compressor, using a lot of electricity to pump that air through expensive filters and dryers, you are wasting a lot of energy, which means you are wasting a lot of money. According to Stotz Gauging, in their article, Air Gauge Not in Use, there are new technologies that can conserve about 40% or more in direct energy costs, and that can mean significant bottom line savings. So if you think of it, any of you who use an air gauge, you know that one of the issues with air gauge is that it really is kind of impractical and inefficient to turn off your air gauges when they're not in use, because doing so would require an extended period of time to restart, balance, and stabilize the airflow measurement so that you're going to get accurate measurements. That stabilization really is critical to running an efficient department and maintaining the proper protocol and measuring procedures. So many departments just let their gauges keep their gauges fired up, right, and running and wasting that energy. And you've seen this. I mean, if you've been into a lab that has, or a measurement lab that has air gauges, very often you can hear these air gauges running in the background, and you just hear that shh in the background, and it's just air just running through them because it just makes sense not to turn them off. The thing is, there are technologies out there that limit the airflow to gauges until it is needed. In other words, they allow enough airflow through the gauge to keep it stabilized and ready to go, and then switch to full airflow when the gauge is actually needed. And, this can be done using things like proximity sensors or other switches that detect when a part is put in the gauge. Or sometimes maybe that you fire up the gauge to full airflow manually with maybe a foot switch or even just a plain old toggle switch, right? So the idea here is that you really are minimizing the amount of air that you're using and keeping enough airflow going that the gauge is ready to go, but you're not using full airflow. So you're really cutting back on the amount of air and thus electricity that you're using. So some technologies, the other advantage of kind of having a system that does this is many times these technologies also connect into your network so that you can monitor gauge uptime, and armed with that data, you can actually quantify your energy savings. So if you know how much energy is going to keep your air compressor going, and you know how much downtime your various air gauges have and how much uptime they have, you can actually kind of quantify the amount of savings that you're getting through your via your less usage on your air compressor. By the way, also this is going to affect the amount of time, how often you have to replace your filters and so forth too. If you're not pumping so much air through them, they're going to be getting less usage, and you're going to save some money in your air filters as well. So all this will basically make your bean counters happy.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what we're looking for.
Kind of an Internet of Things kind of thing there, where you're connected into the network so you can understand what's going on, monitor it in real time. And
right.
Really, you see it all the time. I mean, everything in the shop really now is going to be in some way, shape, or form, if it's not already, connected in, so you can be monitoring them. And
right, and actually that's a good point. And they don't talk about it much in this article, but there is that idea where you really can start quantifying what's going on in your shop. As more and more new equipment has internet connectivity, there's no reason why you can't really be looking at equipment usage, equipment uptime, and actually getting a feel for how much maybe wasted energy you're really putting into your shop.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
and you don't want to do that.
Yeah,
it's a way to lean it out.
Lean it out. Good stuff there. Good stuff there. Excellent. Thanks, Dirk. All right, well, also in the news this week, a recent post on the Knowledge of Wharton website reveals that there are some significant differences in the way that employee terminations are handled across the world.
You're fired.
You're fired. Donald Trump.
There you go.
And that companies, Donald Trump's an American, so hey, there you go. Companies in the United States, like Donald Trump's, are far from the fairest or most compassionate in that regard. Why? Well, it's a simple and familiar refrain, the bottom line. Much of the time, a company's legal, HR, and financial teams believe it to be cheaper to simply wield the axe to control costs. But that has negative repercussions as well that are not so easily measured, like the negative effect on the trust and loyalty of those employees that remain. If you don't show respect to those that you must lay off, in fact, if you really must lay people off, which is a whole nother discussion altogether, do you really need those layoffs? If you don't do it properly, though, if you do need to do it, it's going to cost you money in the long run. Things like offering decent severance packages and placement services to help workers hook up with another job can go a long way toward reassuring the rest of the team that the company actually cares about them as people and not just as cogs in a big profit-making machine. The article draws some interesting parallels between the way that U.S. companies terminate employees versus foreign nations. Here in the United States, many of us know the concept of at-will employment. It's dominant. In other words, cutting through the semantics, that means that an employer can fire an employee pretty much at any time and for any reason or no reason at all. Even via robocalls, informing those employees that the services are no longer required. That's a true story.
That's cold.
Mentioned in this article. There was a robocall.
Bob.
Hello, Bob. You are fired. Have a nice day. That has happened, believe it or not. Well, contrast that with the situation in nations like Japan or France, where companies must demonstrate actual financial losses before they're permitted to issue layoffs. In the Netherlands, Colombia, and China, the government must approve what the article considers and refers to as major layoffs. In Germany, meanwhile, there are some very strict rules about how and when you can let someone go and how much severance must be provided. 4 weeks is the minimum in Germany, in most cases. In short, in many parts of the world, it's very, very difficult to rid yourself of employees, except if your company is clearly failing or the employee in question is clearly incompetent or has established a pattern of gross misconduct. So, what do employers in some of these lands think of these restrictive firing practices? It would seem that, although they're not exactly thrilled by these rules, they see the long-term benefits in terms of better infrastructure in those nations, more camaraderie within the company, and a more stable workforce. You know, we talk all the time about how a company can only deliver quality products and services if they have a good, motivated workforce that's interested, of course, and invested in the future of the company. Better, more ethical employee termination practices can help in this regard. You know, we always talk about how to really do customer service right, your employees need to be happy. They need to be invested in the future of the company. And if they're always worried about getting laid off, and if they're further worried about the fact that if they do get laid off, they're not going to get severance, they're not going to be given any support services on the way out, they're not going to really be focused on doing their job in the moment, and others who remain after a layoff are going to be even more unsettled. So, you know, properly having a plan in place to terminate when you need to, if you need to. Again, you don't necessarily need to, and many lean practitioners would say layoffs are never really necessary. But if you do need to have a plan in place to do it in a humane and ethical way, it's going to help the whole organization. It's going to make the whole company work better and make people feel better about being in that company.
So, hello, Eric.
You are fired. Have a nice day. Happened. Yeah, really.
Gosh, okay. Yeah. Okay, well, switching to, let's say, politics. Policymakers anywhere around the world, but you can look at it here in the United States, they really kind of have a difficult job. If they're doing their job, they are trying to do really what is best for their constituents and the country as a whole. And if they want to keep their job, they have to make everyone happy. And I might say sometimes those are mutually exclusive, but that's another topic. They got to keep everybody happy, policymakers do. And we're talking, you know, they got to keep people in public happy, they got to keep others in government happy, they got to keep business owners happy. And this can really be a real challenge during economic and financial uncertainty when nobody seems to agree on the best path to follow. So, ask the folks at the International Organization for Standardization, otherwise known as ISO, how can they get it right? How can policymakers have some sort of confidence in their decisions, or at least be able to point to examples of how their decisions are supported by data? Because A lot of constituents want to know, well, why are you making this choice?
Right.
Well, look, here's some data that supports it. So what is that data? International standards can be a very useful tool for policymakers. ISO and IEC has offered a toolkit that has ready-made solutions that already have the buy-in of a wide range of international stakeholders. And we're talking international standards here. And to help policymakers reap the benefits of using standards in their initiatives and to communicate why they did so, ISO has published a set of tools, including a new website and a brochure issued jointly with the International Technical Commission, the IEC, backed by practical examples. They detail how to reference international standards and policy decisions and regulations such as public procurement, incentive systems, or awareness campaigns. And I've looked through some of this material. It really is down to earth. So I mean, if you go to the website, and the website and the brochure and so forth are all linked to in the article down there. If you look at what they're saying here, it really is practical examples. They'll give like an industry sector, or they'll do a type of standard, and then they'll point to, okay, what are the ISO standards or the IEC standards that cover this? How, and this is the important bit, how would you use this information? How would you communicate this information to your constituents in a way that'll help them understand why this type of standard is a good standard to buy into, right? Mm-hmm. So it's basically marketing tools, if you think about it. It's marketing tools for policymakers to make, and it makes a lot of sense. The idea as put forth in, let's say, the brochure that I just mentioned, is that the use of IEC and ISO international standards is consistent with the obligations of countries, typically we're talking about that are members of the World Trade Organization. And the purpose of those standards typically is to reduce technical barriers to trade. So therefore, policymakers have a degree of confidence that they are meeting these international obligations when they use IEC and ISO international standards. If you understand at all about, and those of you who have ISO 9001, you understand the way standards are made and what makes them globally relevant is that they've been created by parties, all the parties that would be impacted by these standards. These are consensus standards, what are called consensus standards. All interested parties agree on what the standard should do and how it should work. And because the people involved in the standards development come from around the world, the standards are globally relevant. So this is all really, really good stuff. The ISO Online Tools offers examples of how standards have been used in policy making in various countries and industry sectors. There's also an online platform that policy makers can refer to when using conformity standards in regulation. So that really, like I said, these are just tools to help policymakers do their job better and to communicate it. So go to the article. You can see it down below. There's links out to the brochure, the website, and the tools and so forth. Good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Important stuff too. Of course, all the articles we're covering today are available down below, so check those out. All right, one more news item for you. Lean, top down or bottom up, is the question posed in a recent article on the Forbes website, a link out to which we ran in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. It's a good question, and the article written by Forbes contributor Steve Banker is illuminating. In his piece, Banker focuses on Ryder, a third-party logistics support company with a strong lean ethic and extensive experience working with clients whose warehouses may not have quite the same level of lean expertise that Ryder has. So Ryder therefore offers a great example of not only how to implement and sustain lean activities, but how to share those activities with others, which of course is really important, not only for third-party logistics, but across the supply chain too. Key stuff. According to Bob Arndt, Ryder's Vice President of Lean Supply Chain Solutions, the key is really to approach lean from the top down and the bottom up pretty much at the same time. Arndt states that when Ryder first assumes responsibility for a client's warehouse operation, they don't necessarily need or often or ever bring in new people. See, those that are already working at that site already have all the knowledge, experience, and expertise that they'll need to effectively run a lean shop. They just need to be guided in working in a lean way. While those workers are being coached to see waste and come up with ideas to remove it, managers are taught how to run meetings and execute those valid suggestions and opportunities for improvement, of which there will undoubtedly be many when you bring in lean in a new scenario. Eventually, bottom up and top down will meet in the middle, which is really what's important because that agreeable middle is where everyone contributes ideas and helps improve the organization. It's the wellspring of sustainability in any lean effort, and that sustainment, which is too often the most forgotten part of 5S, as we know, is what really helps any organization achieve continuous improvement for the long haul. And that's what we're looking to do here, I think. Right. They're talking about sustaining lean efforts, right? And if you do that, and if you engage management from the top down and the employers from the bottom up, they meet in the middle, and together with that middle, both being invested in it, they're going to sustain the changes that they make, and they're going to improve the organization in the long term.
Right, and this obviously gets back to management support for anything.
Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, that's why you can't have anything strictly from the bottom if you're not getting support from the top, and the top can't do anything unless they're getting the data from the bottom.
The bottom, absolutely.
Exactly,
Everybody's
yeah.
got to be invested in and bought into that. Really important stuff there.
Okay. Jeff Dewar, our CEO, wrote an article this week that really caught my eye, I think, because it demonstrates how the way we view our work or our job is more often influenced by key events or people in our lives. I mean, if you have been in the workforce for a certain amount of time, you can probably point to a boss or a mentor or maybe even an industry person whose thoughts and actions have stuck with you and influenced you. In Jeff's case, he describes 5 events in his life that have influenced the way he views quality. Jeff is joining us via Skype to talk about those events. Good morning, Jeff.
Hey guys, how you doing? Good morning.
Pretty good. So you seem to be saying in your article that there have been key moments in your life that have profoundly influenced how you view your own job. Can you explain a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, this last year, I had a lot of conversations with a lot of people about, how they ended up in their career. And it kind of astonishes me sometimes of, what they believe, in a very positive way, but also in kind of a bizarre, weird way. How did you end up believing that? Or how is that one of your values? So that sort of led me to think, what are the things that sort of influenced my life in these moments? And so I started with the top 5 that just popped right out. It was, usually something that happened 20 years ago or so that kind of tilted the wheel a little bit. But that was really the genesis of the article.
And give us an example of out of those 5, which one do you think was the one that had the most impact on you? Tell us a little bit about that.
The one I think by a long shot was the Federal Express example. That was back in the late 80s when I was attending a workshop, and Fred Smith, who is the founder of FedEx, he's quite a dynamic fellow. He's about 70 now, but still running the show. And, he kept talking about quality, and this whole group of managers, middle managers, they were like whispering to each other, they're incredulous about what is this quality thing you keep talking about? Our whole company is based on productivity. And, which is kind of intuitive just from the outside looking in. And so he got up on the big whiteboard and he wrote a symbolic equation of Q equals P. And he said that is quality improvement equals productivity improvement. And he defined productivity as output over input. And he said, there's 2 ways to improve productivity. One is to raise your output, or the other is to reduce your input. And so as he was going along, the group there still couldn't get the idea. And they said, well, what do you really want? I mean, really, which is the real thing that you're looking for, the main priority, quality or productivity? And he said, look, I want both. It's because I don't think our board of directors would like it very much if we could say, gee, our quality is really high, but the company's now bankrupt because our costs went through the roof. He said, conversely, I don't think our board of directors would like it very much if our costs went way, way down because of productivity increases, but we lost all our customers because of bad quality. And I remember talking in later conversations about that we probably the biggest management award that you could justifiably say worldwide exists is the Deming Prize, not just for quality, but just in management in general. And certainly we think of Deming as a quality guru more than anything else. But in Japan, and the Deming Prize is now, competed for by companies outside of Japan, like Florida Power and Light. They won it many years ago. That Deming in Japan is known as the father of modern productivity. And the Japanese kept asking that same question. They were all about productivity back in the early 50s during his early teachings. And he said the route to productivity improvement is through quality, through reduced defects, reduced cycle time, and all the other things that quality brings to an organization.
Jeff, you've traveled a lot. You've worked and trained pretty much across the world. And for those of us that are here and spend most of our career in North America, I think sometimes we don't realize how rudimentary some of the quality understanding and initiatives to improve are at other places in the world. You had a great example you used talking about power utility in South Africa and how they kind of got their message across about quality. So you want to explain that one a little bit?
Sure. This is one of the hallmarks of my life. I've told it to my kids endlessly, and I felt very privileged. I got to see, and I really saw. I've been to South Africa at least 36 times. Not just for 2 days, but for 2 months at a time. I got to see from the late 80s throughout the 90s the change in the political environment, the fall of apartheid. The rise of one man, one vote. Back before 92, basically the only people that voted out of a total population of roughly 50 million were the 6 million whites that really ran the show. And ESCOM, which stands roughly for Electricity Supply Commission of South Africa, it's the largest electricity provider in Africa. They created, as the gale force winds were changing the whole attitude of South Africans about what they were doing with regard to apartheid, that they really needed to look beyond, actually have their sort of key institutions, of which obviously the main electricity provider is one, really communicated what they were doing as employers. And so they created this vision. And the remarkable part, the vision was 3 words. We think of a vision and a mission, and it's these long paragraphs and all this. Their vision was 3 words, and it was electricity for all. Because the black neighborhoods simply had no electricity, or very, very little. It was all done for the benefit of the white neighborhoods and the industries that were controlled by the whites and so on. And so they tied quality to that vision statement. And I remember a year after this whole promotion of electricity for all as the vision came out, I was out there on many of the shop floor talking to the rank and file, and I'm saying, so why are you doing quality? Why are you so committed to quality? After they made it very clear that they're embracing quality, because they saw it as a means to an end to help achieve the vision of electricity for all. And that really that was the shivers down the spine moment, where now quality is not something that's a program, but it really truly is tied to something much larger than you and much more noble than just you personally.
So that ties in really to the idea of really the everybody in the company understanding what the vision and the mission of a company is. Jeff, hey, thanks for joining us this morning. We got to move on, but I encourage everybody to go out there and read the entire article. You heard 2 examples of things that affected Jeff's view on the workplace and quality. There's 3 others that are just as interesting, so I encourage you to go out there and read the article. Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Okay, guys. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Jeff. Bye. Yeah, good article. Really good article.
It's interesting.
Got a really good response. A lot of you read it. If you haven't read it yet, check it out. Again, you can check out the link below the links down below, and really good story.
And just, I think everybody should take some time, I know I've done it, is think about what are those people and events in your lives that really have affected, because I think we all are. There is something that has affected all of us in the way we view our place in the workforce. And it's good to reflect on that and understand what that is and what it means.
Yeah, mine was June 9th, 2004, my first day at Quality Digest. Right? I was like, wow, this is quite an industry.
I didn't know what that was. There's people who actually
make sure stuff works right.
In the job title?
Good stuff there. All right, thanks. Thanks again, Jeff, for a great article, and Dirk for covering it. Okay, last story of the day for QDL is leveraging quality tools throughout the organization that appeared in, I believe it was Thursday's issue of Quality Digest Daily, written by our good friend Akhilesh Gulati. Akhilesh writes for us very often about these tools, about quality tools, and about how they can be leveraged throughout the organization. That was the series that he's talking about here. Well, this one is near and dear, of course, to my heart. heart because what he's doing here in this piece is he's talking about using design of experiments, DOE, and other Six Sigma tools to show whether or not advertising works. Now, I'm not a white belt or any kind of a belt, but I can tell you without any uncertainty that it does. Advertising works.
It works.
It works great.
It's
And
awesome.
There's no doubt about it. But
Call 530-893-4095.
Would you buy an ad from this man, please? No, seriously though, to set the stage for this, Akalesh is relating a case study of real importance, I think, and practicality. In this particular organization, they're trying to determine the return on investment of a specific undertaking. In this case, it's marketing, their marketing efforts, right? Which is something that
every company does.
Every company's got to do, right? You're going to spend money on advertising and marketing and reaching out, and you're going to know what you're getting for the money that you're spending, right? So they're trying to look at that through their different channels, and there's a lot of channels that a major company are going to go through, obviously, to advertise and to market and to reach new clients and new customers. Successfully teasing out the things that work and that don't work, and things like regional efforts, different offers that are going out in different regions, response rates to those, conversion rates, click-throughs, all the things that you need to know and analyze, against one another, both in concert with each other and against one another. That's a perfect scenario for using design of experiments, I think, and other tools such as design of experiments. The bigger picture here and the point of Akalesh's piece is that used properly, there are few, if any, business functions that cannot be better analyzed, improved, and controlled by tools such as design of experiments, which is a great example. This issue that he's talking about here is what I would consider to be I guess you call it a bugaboo, something that is a problem for a lot of quality improvement specialists and trainers. The idea that many managers in particular have is that tools like these, like design of experiments, Six Sigma tools, are best used for specific executable business practices on the shop floor, manufacturing, right? But service and transactional environments have seen explosive, seriously, explosive improvements through the adoption of tools like Lean and Six Sigma. Healthcare is a perfect example. We talk about healthcare all the time. Healthcare, in some senses, can be looked at as kind of a manufacturing process with an assembly line, but it really is a service and a transactional environment. And things like wait time in an ER, right, is a perfect example, right, of how you can improve service operations through Lean or Six Sigma practices, right? So why not marketing and advertising? Today, with the prevalence of data that's available, and we know this here working obviously in our business, there is a ton of information available, especially for undertakings that'll happen online, where people, you can track users through their process and how you get them, how they come to your site, what they do when they're on your site, right? You can use analytics to find all that out. So if you're gathering the data, if the data's available, you kind of would be foolish not to use a design of experiments on the various streams of that to tease out the real meaningful data from the data that's still meaningful but not quite as meaningful maybe, and understand with pretty great degree of specificity what your return on investment is going to be for unique marketing campaigns. It's a really interesting way of looking at it.
And I think marketing and advertising is interesting because, as you know, a lot of the choices marketing people use for what marketing channels to use is all based on kind of gut feel and anecdote. Well, of course we're going to advertise on the back cover of such and such a magazine because everybody knows that does the best. Well, do you really know that?
You don't know.
Have you actually measured it?
Right.
And yet, I know when you've gone out in the field to talk to people, there are those hardcore things that are in people's minds. Well, you got to advertise here and you got to advertise there and you got to use that channel. Why?
Yeah.
Well, because we've always done it that way.
Okay. Well, have you tracked it? Have you analyzed it? Have you done a design of experiment to understand what you're really getting from that spend?
Yeah.
We always want to, of course, try to encourage people to do a lot of advertising and a lot of marketing to support their products, right? And to do different things, but we always want to have a case to defend using data to say, hey, this is what you got. For X, you got Y. And you should be able to understand that, and a service provider like a Quality Digest should be able to give you that data, but really it's up to you as an advertiser to gather that data yourself on the different channels that you're undertaking and understand, for X, are you getting Y? And if you're not getting Y, can you get Y? And if you just can't get Y because it just isn't feasible from that channel, well, maybe that's not a channel you need to use.
Yep.
Really good stuff. I mean, it makes you think, and again, it's broader than just advertising. For us, it's personal with advertising, of course, but you think about all those different service and transactional operations that go on in any large organization, and hey, tools like design of experiments really can be very practical for analyzing a lot of different inputs and outputs. So think about that.
Operators are standing by.
That's right.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us this week on Quality Digest Live. And thanks to also our CEO, Jeff Dewar, for joining us and kind of relating some of his experiences out in the field that affected the way that he views quality. Hope you all do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and hey, you know what? Comment on the article. Log in and read the article. If you have some moments of quality of your own that you think we all should consider, write them up. Write them up in the comment section, and Jeff or one of us will get back to you and we'll let you know what we think of your moments of quality as well.
That's right. Okay, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next Friday.
That's right. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Four, three, two, one, fire.